Welcome, Ben, to the Lunch Bites podcast. So, the first question is if you could share a little bit about your journey into real estate. You're a real estate agent, right?
I am a real estate agent and I own investment property, and it's great to sit down with you.
What inspired you to start Heart Homes?
I was inspired to invest in real estate because I watched all the TV shows, HGTV, and I was good with my hands and I was handy. And, we live in Rochester. It's a wonderful town, wonderful city, but there's a lot of Rust Belt charm. But some of that Rust Belt charm is because there's been economic ebbs and flows, and some of our housing stock really could use some love and TLC. So I found that was the way I could contribute value, is to use remodeling skills and offer them up for rent or sale. Heart Homes LLC, home is where the heart is, right? That whole concept of ethical and sustainable real estate, that was developed later over time as I worked adjacent in health and human services, and I was exposed to what people are dealing with in terms of poverty. So I was working like social work adjacent kind of business at Hillside Children's Center, and still do. But that really opened my eyes to what people are experiencing and the conditions people are living in and how unacceptable it is and how we all have to do better. Landlords, tenants, politicians, homeowners, stakeholders, really everyone involved should be pulling together to make housing better. The other part of the framing was going to RIT and working on my master's in business administration, and I can't credit them enough with helping me really define my mission, or refine my mission, I should say. I always felt compelled to do something, but I didn't know how to communicate it succinctly. I didn't know how to brand myself. I didn't have the skills maybe to scale, and now I think I'm in a much better position to do so because of all my experiences at RIT.
I kind of want to dive in because I really would love for people to understand the landscape of Rochester, especially when it comes to housing insecurity. If you can kind of dive into maybe there's a story that you have or a family that you've helped, or maybe anything that comes to mind that really paints the picture of why Heart Homes is needed in Rochester.
I try not to tell too many direct stories of my tenants because I don't want to exploit them or kind of tell their stories for them. But housing insecurity it's visible. I mean, you can drive down streets, you see the level of evictions we have, and there's a historical element to this where you've got redlining, divestment. There's tons of studies that show if you live in some of our poorest zip codes, you're more likely to have asthma, you're much more likely to have lead poisoning. So the health conditions and maternal birth weights vary based on your zip code. When I spoke to Assemblymember Harry Bronson about his opinions on housing and housing insecurity, he had a very succinct way of put it. You can drive 10 minutes and life expectancy drops by 10 years. So that's pretty stark reality, and it didn't happen by accident. And even though I didn't necessarily contribute to that, I'm still responsible for it. We're all responsible for it. So we have to look back through our history. We have to look at our present circumstances, and we have to reimagine housing and what that looks like. And I don't have all the answers. Heart Homes is a small piece of that puzzle. But my voice, I hope it carries, and I hope people start thinking about this. And I think there's a lot of people doing good work in housing, so I know I'm not alone, but I do want to stand out from the crowd. Slumlords, gentrifiers, that's not a good way to do business. It's not ethical, it's not sustainable, and we have to think through a better way of doing business.
And that kind of leads into my next question, which was the positive rent reporting, right? How does that play into this? You just mentioned gentrification, slumlords, and things like that, and you are implementing positive rent reporting with your tenants. So what does that look like? Why did you choose to go that route? I feel like the answer is right there, but it's still always great to have an eye-opener or hearing firsthand your perspective on why you went that way.
Right. So it's actually positive only rent reporting. So positive only credit reporting. So just like a credit card or a car payment or any sort of payment obligation you have every month, you can build credit based on your on-time payment history. Or you could have negative effects, right, if you don't pay your credit card or don't pay your car payment. But Heart Homes chose and we were a participant in an initiative of the City of Rochester and the Credit Builders Alliance, which is a national organization, similar kind of to like Consumer Credit Counseling of Rochester, except on a national level. And I think they actually have some ties to one another. But just to keep it simple, when my tenants pay on time or not too late, right? Because I think you have to be, even if you pay mid-month, you'd still get credit. So every month I click, yes, they paid on time or close enough, and they build credit because folks are banking invisible. They may cash their check, pay their rent, but they are not building credit. And credit's important. It really determines a lot of our success and upward mobility. And I think responsible people should get credit for that. And some states are even issuing laws that if you own a certain number of units, you have to provide this service to your tenants. And it's not just for better credit, like better borrowing rates. It's also for any kind of dream that you want to pursue. People are checking credits for employment. It determines your car insurance rates. So even if you don't have any debt and don't want any debt, you can still pay more for the same things based on your credit score, or be opted out of future opportunities to be in a different apartment, or any number of things. But also I think it's important because I hope my tenants aspire to home ownership. I think a lot of them do. And they might aspire to entrepreneurship. I mean, we're on a podcast talking about entrepreneurship. A lot of my tenants have those aspirations. They've executed them. Some do lawn businesses, some do hair, one does private catering, and that's hard to do as a tenant. And it's even harder to do if you don't have a banking history or anything else. So I want to be supportive of that. It has a small cost to me, but the City of Rochester and their partners that they brought together were able to provide some funding so I could take my tenants out to dinner and describe it. And none of this would have happened if the relationship is strained, if there's no trust, right? They're like, wait, you want my Social Security for what? You want to give this to who? And I think we were able to find this win-win because of my ethical and sustainable practices and my investment in the relationship.
Yeah, I love that, because what you're doing is keeping your mission and your why front and center throughout your entire business, even just from the few minutes that we've talked so far. My next question was going to be, how do you keep your mission present? But it's just so evident in how you operate as a business. And a lot of times I feel as entrepreneurs, we're either pivoting so much and having to shift, but how do you stick to your why as an entrepreneur? What allows you to stick again to your why, to your mission, but also there are a lot of shiny pennies out there. And especially I would think in the real estate world. And so how do you stay focused on your why and how you started? I think that would really help entrepreneurs to not just chase every new idea, new product.
Yeah, there was a shift in our cultural understanding of what business does and what business is for, and that it's just to deliver profit to stakeholders, to shareholders. So that's like Milton Friedman's economics, and I think that has limitations, and that doesn't have to be what business is. I still want to make money. I don't mind making money because I'm providing a good product. And I don't think anyone begrudges me that. If you work hard and you deliver value, the community will reward you, and you will be able to retire comfortably, and you made your mark. But I think it's when it's severe power imbalance between you and your customers, that's when it becomes problematic. And I think some people are just stuck and their choices are limited. Consumer power is very difficult to achieve in housing. Switching costs are very high, basically. I hear landlords say, well, it's just supply and demand. It is what it is. It's my property. You don't like the rules, get out. And that's okay for things like apples and oranges. Like literally, we do this apples and oranges or mangoes and strawberries, right? If one gets too expensive, you can just switch. Yeah. You can just go to the grocery store and switch. You can't move in the blink of an eye. And so the lack of consumer protection and power has really created problems. Now, I still think landlords need to have some protection under the law too, right? We're providing a product and we don't want property being damaged. We don't want people breaking lease and bringing in dogs and animals, and we want people to pay their rent and agree to some fair terms, and but it has to be an equitable relationships. And I think ethics and morality is it's mandatory. It's mandatory in all business. All business is people business. You can own 50 buildings and they can be worthless if they're unsafe to live in, if your customers aren't paying you. If you want business to work, you have to treat your customers right. And I think somehow that's gotten broken down, and we can get into the history and all this other stuff. But in terms of keeping my mission front and center, it's privately owned. I don't have to answer to any shareholders. I can just answer to a lot of stakeholders. I keep mixing those up. But yeah, I answer to everybody. But I don't answer to maybe some money that wants to maximize profit that's focused on quarterly earnings. I can really take a long-term view, and I think that helps. So be careful who you partner with, be careful what their priorities are. Maybe I could have grown faster, but I want this to be mine, and I don't want it to become perverted by taking on someone else's money and then having to be accountable to their needs and priorities. And then just my background, I grew up in the city of Rochester in the 19th Ward. I saw some of the advantages I had that other people didn't have in my community. I saw the blight, I saw the poverty. I continue to see it in my working career as I built my business alongside, my social work and human service career. And I said, there's got to be a better way. And I thought those were two separate things. Like, I was investing in real estate and I was, a social work adjacent kind of person. I don't have a social work degree, so I always have to call it social work adjacent. But I realize, they're very interconnected if I want them to be. And I chose to lean into that.
And that kind of ties really well into scaling deep. I was recently introduced to this concept of scaling deep in a sense. I've heard about it, I've done it, but it's never been an intentional move of mine. How do you, or what does it look like in practice for you to kind of scale deep with your business versus growing wider, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so Heart Homes LLC is going to live and die by Rochester and the community. That's risky because there's things that I can't control about Rochester's success or failure, but at the same time, I think it's really powerful to be fully invested into a community and to keep that focus. I think some businesses used to have that, and for better or for worse, right? Kodak was Xerox. We were very tied to Rochester, and when they had their struggles, Rochester had struggles too. But I just want to be focused, and I feel like this is my home. When I make $1 and I spend $1, or my tenants have success, right? That's contributing to the ripples and the pools of wealth and stability of Rochester. And so I love this town. I love this city. I grew up here. I care about it. I don't have any plans of leaving. I mean, I want to travel, but this is always going to be home. And so I just want to see Rochester thrive. So that's what it means to scale deep, in my opinion, is like, you may not be, millions and millions of dollars and billions of people. You may not go public, Series A, Series B, all this different things. Like, some people want that, and some businesses lend themselves to that, right? That's a good way to go. If you've got a software company, you're going to need to take on equity partners, and you're going to need to take your solution global. And Heart Homes doesn't need to take its solution global, although I hope the solution itself does go global, that more and more real estate investors and developers think in ethical terms and think about their customers and stop treating their customers so badly.
Right.
But that part is, I don't need to do that myself. I can evangelize it. I can talk about it. Maybe someone listens to the podcast and they say, let me try that. But Heart Homes doesn't need to be the biggest real estate company for me to live a comfortable life, to get what I want out of it, and to feel like I achieve something meaningful with my time and my heartbeats, because that's what we're giving up to our businesses. Entrepreneurship is tough. It's a spiritual journey. You got to be ready for the ups and downs and the pains, and you get to the top of one mountain and then you realize you're at the bottom of the next mountain before you know it.
I love that analogy. There's so much that you just said there that I wish we had more time to dive into, but you started talking a little bit about how entrepreneurship is tough. Do you have maybe, I don't necessarily want to focus on the challenges. I feel like a lot of us have challenges as entrepreneurs, as people, but I kind of want to focus on the pivotal moments. Has there been a pivotal moment within the development of your business, the growing, the scale, whatever it may be with your business? What is a pivotal moment that has helped you to land where you are, or even helped you to kind of think about where you're going with Heart Homes?
Yeah, I think it's about patience. So if you want to be in real estate especially, and if you want to be ethical, sometimes you have to take short-term pain for long-term gain. And so when I bought some of my really, really distressed properties, I really had to work hard to bring them to livable condition. I mean, these were unlivable properties, some of the ones that I buy. And now it's like old hat, it's repeated. But in 2012, I bought one. It was so bad, it was on the front page of the newspaper. And it was an article about blight and some other factors I don't want to talk about, but
Mm-hmm.
it was literally on the front page of the Democrat and Chronicle, and it talked about how many code violations it had. And I was swarmed with code inspectors that said, "Are you going to fix this? This is not a good look to have this on the front page of the paper. You got to fix this, and we're not going to give you any breaks." And in a W-2 job, you get paid maybe every 2 weeks, maybe every week, But in entrepreneurship, you might get paid every year. You might get paid every 5 years if you're in real estate and you've got a really serious project. Like your break-even point could be a ways off, and it's good money. It can be, right? There's some success I've had. I feel proud of my success, but you got to stick with things. You got to be patient enough. You got to experience a lot of pain, and you got to throw more money, time, and effort after something, feels like, man, I just wish I could walk away, right? You can just get a new job, but it's a lot harder to sell a house that's 95% complete, but it's going to take everything you got to get that last 5%. So, yeah, that 2012, it was a tough time for the economy. Housing had experienced a real correction, and I was kind of buying into a market that still could go either way. Really, really poor conditions, and yeah, it almost broke me, but I feel like I'm stronger for it, and now I can do a project like that, not quite in my sleep, but it's a lot easier because I develop skills and develop patience, and now that's kind of like a rinse and repeat thing, to buy distressed houses and fix them up. But that was one of the biggest projects I've ever done. And now, of course, I got a pivotal moment now. I just bought one December 31st. It's my first commercial.
Oh, okay.
So it's a mixed use. It's got 2 residential units and a commercial space. So there's a big learning curve there.
Yeah.
And I guess, in entrepreneurship, there's always learning, and you got to be ready for it.
That's so perfect, because it leads right to my next question. So other than patience, what are some other lessons that you've learned in both real estate? I feel like I know so many people in real estate who want to go into real estate, even as young as 17, who know already that that's the path that they want. So what are maybe some lessons that you've learned in that profession, but then also as a business owner trying to create impact in the community?
Yeah, I think you absolutely need to keep your personal and your business finances separate. It's very critical to master self and master the art of delayed gratification. It's not all flashy, and social media will tell you it is, right? You're going to see someone's highlight reel on social media, and you're going to see, and that's not the truth. Either they are faking, or they grind it a lot to show you their highlights. So don't believe everything you see, and be prepared to work. But the best investment you can always make is in yourself, in your own education, and in your own personal development. So your character, that's going to mean a lot more. And believe me, I've made my mistakes, financially, risk-taking, all that, but even my ethical mistakes. I've made some bad choices along the way, and that's how you learn. But just try not to repeat the same mistakes 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. But absolutely, yeah, kind of separate yourself from your business just enough that you are understanding that that's going to take time to build up. Your personal life is something else. Just be careful with that balance of like which hat you're wearing. That's the hardest part.
Yeah, balance is interesting. I love the way you phrased it, which is separating yourself from your business just enough. I feel like a lot of people get lost in their businesses, and even if it's a mission-driven business, it's so easy to kind of get lost in the mission, or lost in the profit, or lost just in the overall concept. So on the topic of balance, or maybe what's one strategy or something that you've done to help you balance mission with profit and not getting lost in the mix of it all, not losing yourself?
Well, you talked about shiny pennies, but yeah, there can be some shiny pennies in terms of mission too. There's a lot of need out there, and there's a lot of good you can do. And sometimes really small efforts can make a big difference, but it's hard to evaluate that in the moment. And it's easy to get burned out because there's so many problems within housing instability, if that's what you care about, or healthcare, or education. It can be really a whack-a-mole. So what I would say is just try to budget your time. Like, if you're going to do speaking engagements, how many can you really do? If you're going to do coffee meetings, how many? Don't get lost in like networking for networking's sake, always. Sometimes you got to do the back end office stuff. I don't have the answers though, but I would say just try to set a budget. Try to systematize it into a process, and everyone's process is going to be different. But and I'm not great at this, right? I'm still working on it. I'm still perfecting my craft, but I think that's the important thing is like don't get lost in too much marketing and then not deliver for your customers, and don't get too caught up in delivering and forget to tell, because then you don't have any pipeline. So it can be a lot of trade-offs, a lot of whack-a-mole situations, but just try to develop into a process and budget your time just as much as you budget your capital.
I've known you kind of for maybe about a year or so, I think. And whenever I see you, I think joy, I think patience, I think calm and ease, which is interesting because how we see ourselves is different than how other people see us. And so I think joy, I think patience, I think calm and ease. And then I think about the work you're doing and how there's so much heaviness in it, but then there's so much joy on the other side of it. And I guess my question here is, what brings you joy within your business? What do you love most about your business? Why are you so passionate about it? I know you've kind of gone through a little bit of your story. I guess I'm asking, what's your why? Why do you do this? What brings you fulfillment in Heart Homes?
Well, I do not feel like I'm calm at all. I feel like like the duck analogy. You ever hear about the duck?
No,
the duck floats smoothly across the water, but if you look underneath, the feet are going. So yeah, sometimes my mind is going and I'm restless, and sometimes I just need to get up and on a roof and rip it off and put a new one on. Like I need to get my hands dirty. So it can be different every day, but there is a restlessness, and I think entrepreneurs are drawn to entrepreneurship because they're secretly restless. So however I appear on the outside, I've got a lot of restlessness. I've got a lot of goals that are still waiting to be done. But my why is I just know that I have something to offer the world. I know I'm good at this. I know that I feel a deep sense of satisfaction with taking, a house that's unsafe, that looks ugly, and turning it into a home. One of my mottos is like, it's my house, but it's your home, right? I can't complete the work. I can refinish the floors and paint everything and make it look good, but until I turn those keys over, it's not a home. It's my house. I pay the taxes on it. I make a little money for the service I provide, but it's your home. And I do want my tenants to consider home ownership, either buying the house from me or buying a house somewhere else. Like I think home ownership is valuable in and of itself, and it's complicated. It's complicated. Some folks are trying to be more ethical. They're actually pivoting away from single family homes because they feel like they're competing with first time home buyers, and that's I'm doing the opposite. I focus on single family homes, so that's a pitfall I need to think about too. I need to think about all of it. And I think it's okay because I'm usually buying things that are distressed enough that first-time home buyer probably isn't competing. But it is something to think about. So it needs to be tweaked. The mission needs to be tweaked. The delivery system needs to be tweaked. I just care about my community. I don't know what the top of the mountain is. I see a lot of entrepreneurs in their journey, and they make all this money and they work really hard. And then they have to work just as hard to give that money away, to be philanthropic. And I mean, I'm sure they're comfortable. They're eating nice dinners. They're going on vacations. But it's not uncommon to see people make a lot of money and then want to give it back and channel it into causes that they care about. And I don't know where that balance line will be for me. I'm still kind of in the growing and building stage. But I think that's going to be the last step in the evolution. Is like, now that I made all this money, and I hope I made it in an ethical way that helps people, but then I want to keep helping people. So I feel like that's what I'm setting up for. So I don't know, that's kind of like just an interesting side quest, I guess. I don't know how to describe it, but yeah,
I get it.
What's my why? I don't know. I want to make a difference. I want to know that I didn't waste my time or waste my heartbeats.
live, breathe, and bleed your business. Your heart, it's Heart Homes, right?
Home is where the heart is.
Right, and it's just, it's fully, I can see it in you and how you present yourself and your pitch that I watched last year and your story then and just talking with you now. It's very evident that you built this business, but this business is really made for you, for a person like you, because you walk the mission, you live the mission, you speak the mission. And I think that's one of the qualities that I really admire about you is you're not just someone who saw an opportunity, but you saw a way to help, and then you're building on that. And for me, it looks like the joy that you get out of this, like you just said, is it's just being able to help people and help your community. I wouldn't say that that's necessarily hard to come by, but sometimes it's very hidden based on what we see in the media, social media, news, whatever. But it feels good to know that there are people like you in a community like Rochester helping to make it better, to keep people safe. I love that about Heart Homes. So when your name came through, I was like, yes. Finally get to sit down and chat with Ben.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. It's a wonderful opportunity. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of high profile businesses that did unethical things in real estate and healthcare, people jacking up prices during hurricanes or exploiting opportunities and spying on us and using our personal data. Like, it's fraught with ethical pitfalls. But if you think about it, by and large, you get your coffee somewhere and that's a business. You may rent a space somewhere, you may own a home, you may have used a realtor, an attorney. Like, a lot of these people are small businesses, and you get your groceries from a business. So business is not bad. And I think some people get caught up in that. And, you know, they say corporations, but like LLC, I think, you know, a lot of these places are corporations, right? I mean, LLC it's limited liability companies, so it's not necessarily limited liability corporations, but a lot of the small businesses that you like and care about are technically corporations. So I think we need to like change that language. If we want to criticize like the power and dominance, we need to start using conglomerate, right? There is a big problem with like conglomerates that own trillions of dollars of assets and can really, you know, not be held to account because they have lawyers and deep pockets and everything else. But, you know, I think most businesses are in the business of doing good or they wouldn't exist. You know, most businesses have made our lives better more than worse. And even though there's big examples of them not doing that, there's probably more examples that just don't make the headlines.
I love that. It helps to kind of help people relearn and remember that business isn't bad. It really is part of really what makes the world go round. Communities exist. And thank you for shining a light on that. I kind of want to shift to where the last couple of questions, so where I don't want to do advice. I feel like I've done the advice question already.
Okay.
So is there anything, I'm going to think of something while you answer this question, but is there anything that you want to share that you didn't hit on, any way that people can support what you're doing or learn about what you're doing even?
Yeah, there's a ton of resources now. People are writing and talking and thinking about housing instability. Matthew Desmond came to Rochester. He wrote great books about poverty, about housing instability, about some of the problems and pitfalls. And I'm not saying I agree with everything he wrote, but I really think it was eye-opening and he shined a light on a problem. The Color of Law is another book about injustices. And so just familiarize yourself with these thought leaders and these thinkers. And then in terms of my business, yeah, you can stay in touch with me at www.hearthomesroc.com. There's a contact form if you want to reach out to me. I like to have coffee with folks and like-minded individuals. And yeah, I'm not sure collaboratively. I'm kind of a small operation with big ideas and big dreams and trying to make myself have a big voice, at least in Rochester, or a deep voice, right? Scale deep in Rochester. But we've got 9 residential units. We're trying to remodel 1 or 2 a year and hoping to dispose of them as well. So if there's a partnership with a non-for-profit that wants to see more home ownership, I would like to sit down and figure that out together. Like, I'll do the redevelopment part, and then you help them qualify and become homeowners, because I can't do it all, right? I'm realizing I need some strategic partnerships. So I don't know what that looks like, but I'm open to the conversation.
Love that, love that. So I figured out a question, and that is, what would you tell younger Ben at this point? It could be anything, just what would you tell him?
Pace yourself. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Mm.
Yeah. I think sometimes in my life I've felt so much pressure and anxiety, and I pushed myself too hard, and you crash that way. So that's what I would say. Pace yourself, but younger Ben wouldn't listen. Ben right now won't listen to that. I'll still go hard and then crash, and that's just who I am. But sometimes it's a strength, right? Because I can push through a lot of pain and get something done and deliver something. And sometimes it's a failing, and I wish I was more steady. But that's entrepreneurship for you.
Mm-hmm.
If you want a 9 to 5 and that's it, there's plenty of that out there. But if you want entrepreneurship, it might be 9 to 9, 9 to 9, 9 to 9, crash.
Agree. Well, Ben, this was awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today and just having this conversation. I've learned more about you. I know our listeners will learn so much more about your mission and then who you are as a person. And I love doing this because we don't just talk about the business. We don't just give business tips that people can, find anywhere, but we really get to know who the business owner is. And I think that's so important because sometimes we just see the logo, we just see the brand, and it's important to get to know the person behind it. So thank you so much.